Hello everyone, welcome back. I hope your day is starting off as fantastic as it possibly can here in our great country of Canada. And as I give you the introduction to this video, what we're going to talk about, let me cycle through some of the pictures that all of you shared of your favorite spots or where you're from in this country in the new I Choose Canada group that I set up recently. I'm sorry to report that I have more good news. News that makes me once again cautiously optimistic for Canada's future. And maybe it hasn't been presented this way to you yet. It's the latest economic numbers that were just released, and you may have read reports on these numbers, and they may have been presented to you in a doom and gloom way. We're all aware that since Donald Trump was elected president in the United States, he launched a trade war basically against the whole world, but in particular targeting Canada, saying things like he wanted to crush Canada economically and he wanted Canada to become the 51st state. And he and his administration came up with the master plan that a good way of achieving greatness, you know, the hats that they wear, Make America Great Again, which I always found a little bit strange because if they wear a hat that says Make America Great Again, they're sort of admitting that it's not great now. Although they keep talking about it being great, but they want it to be great again. I'm not really sure how that works, but their strategy was to alienate the whole world, threaten the whole world, and apply tariffs to imports of goods from the whole world so that American companies that import these goods could pay more for everything so that the companies could then use these more expensive goods to manufacture things and sell those things to their citizens for a higher price and try to export some of those goods to the rest of the world for a higher price. Are you following this strategy so far? If you're not, it's okay because it's a dumb strategy. And of course, one of the natural effects when the US imposes tariffs, a tax on everything they import from all over the world, is that demand for those imports will decrease in the United States. And it's a simple economic fact that if a government sucks money out of the economy in the form of a tax, that being known as a restrictive policy, it'll result in this. The total amount of money that exists in that economy will be able to purchase less because everything will cost more because the government is taking a piece. That's the definition of a restrictive policy. Now, the US administration embarked on this policy because they felt that the whole world was ripping them off, because the US was importing a lot more goods from the rest of the world than they were selling to the rest of the world. They're running what's called a trade deficit with the rest of the world. Now, all that means is that Americans are fairly rich and they're big consumers, so they like to buy a lot of things. But Donald Trump didn't frame it that way. He said that other countries were taking advantage of the United States and they were basically stealing from the United States. And the United States was subsidizing the whole world and that he would fix it all by imposing tariffs on everyone. And then the United States trade deficit would fall and all those jobs, all the manufacturing, all the jobs related to everything to do with anything the US imports will relocate into the United States and the whole world's economy will center in the United States and the United States will be the richest place in the universe. But there's one thing that Donald Trump didn't really factor into his plans. Regular people from around the world that are the backbone of the world's economies. How are they going to react to all this? Well, I'll show you. Let's actually look at some real numbers now. Reported on Reuters here on July 3rd, U.S. trade deficit widens in May on weak exports. The U.S. trade deficit, the thing that Donald Trump wants to decrease, the reason he started this tariff war, because the U.S. trade deficit was too big. The U.S. trade deficit widened sharply in May as exports fell. The trade gap increased 18.7% to $71 billion in May. And this is information from the U.S. Commerce Department Bureau of Economic Analysis. This huge increase in the trade deficit, again, the opposite of what the U.S. was trying to achieve, has chopped off a record 4.61 percentage points from the gross domestic product in the first quarter. That's a massive effect, a massive negative effect. These are the numbers that the US wanted to go up. Exports fell 4% to 279 billion. Goods exports dropped 5.9% to 180 billion. And as the US trade deficit was widening, what do you think happened to Canada's trade deficit? Obviously, it has to be just as bad or worse news because if the Americans put tariffs on everything from Canada and they're buying so much less from us and they're our biggest trading partner, our trade deficit must have skyrocketed. It must be even worse for Canada, right? Wrong. Reported on the same day, July 3rd, Canada's trade deficit narrows in May. U.S. exports dropped to the lowest since the pandemic. How could it narrow if exports to the U.S. have dropped to the lowest since the pandemic? Canada's trade deficit in May narrowed after a record-breaking deficit in April as total exports rose. Let me read that again. Total exports rose even though exports to the United States are the lowest since the pandemic. And it's summarized perfectly here by senior economist with Export Development Canada, someone named Prince Owusu, who says the biggest takeaway I feel from this data is just diversification. While we continue to bleed in the US, we are basically diverting trade to other markets. And rather than just read someone else's opinions or repeat some slogans, let's go to the source of this information. We're on the StatsCan website, which is the Canadian entity that actually releases this data monthly. In May, Canada's merchandise exports were up 1.1%. Now just think about that. Let that sink in. Our merchandise exports were up 1.1%, even though our exports to the United States are the lowest they've been since the pandemic. And I won't read everything on this page because that would make it a boring video. I'm going to show you a couple of charts, but just two headlines here. Exports to the United States decrease a fourth consecutive month. Meanwhile, exports to countries other than the United States reached a record high. Right around the time when Donald Trump took office, this point right here, January 2025, from that point on, you'll see that exports to the United States have gone straight down. And that's because the US imposed tariffs on Canada, so there's going to be less demand for those products. That's what we were worried about, and that's where all the doom and gloom and Canada's broken and what are we going to do and all the rhetoric started that we should just panic and there's no way we could fight the United States because there's such a big economy and we have to cave to them immediately and that poor little Canada won't be able to do anything about it. Oh, what are we going to do? Well, Canadians responded here in the light blue line. Imports from the United States also have gone straight down, and that's mainly because people like you and me have just decided to choose Canada and not buy US products. Why would you want to support the economy of another country who's threatening and hostile towards you? Why would you buy an American car? Why would you go to the grocery store and buy American carrots? I went to the grocery store just the other day, and the Canadian carrots were all sold out, and all they had left was US carrots. So I bought some rutabaga instead. I don't even like rutabaga, but I'll eat it because I'm not buying the American ones. Why would you go on vacation to a country that's threatening and hostile towards your country? Why would you spend your hard-earned dollars there? Why wouldn't you spend them here? That's what this drop in this light blue line is. And this line should drop faster and farther. This is a graph of merchandise trade with countries other than the United States. You can see in the dark line here that exports to other countries are heading straight up, and imports from other countries are heading straight up as Canada forms new trade alliances, new supply routes, and concentrates on doing business with our friends around the world. Look at this chart that summarizes our trade, and I've taken my face off the video so you can see it all. The top column here, total exports, May 2024, April 2025, May 2025, and then the month-over-month percent change from April till May. And let's look at the year-over-year change from May 2024 to May 2025. Exports to the United States down almost 16%. And that's a massive number considering we do 70-75% of our trade with the United States. 15% of that huge amount of trade, almost 16% decrease in exports to the United States, a slight decrease in exports to China, and also surprisingly a slight decrease in exports to Mexico. But almost completely offsetting that, not quite, but almost, a 23% increase in exports to Japan, a 46% increase in exports to Germany, over a 300% increase in exports to the United Kingdom, a 5% increase in exports to South Korea, an 87% increase in exports to the Netherlands. An anomalous number here year over year with Switzerland because for some reason May in 2024 we had a huge amount of exports to Switzerland. Month over month we're actually up 56% with Switzerland and over 100% increase in exports to Italy. So we're simply pivoting away from the United States and dealing more with the rest of the world. So once again, I'm trying to explain to you what these numbers mean, because it's easy. You can take any set of statistics and spin them however you want. You can pull out one of those numbers and write an inflammatory rhetoric story or put something out on social media like, oh no, exports to the United States have dropped 16%. What are we going to do? Canada's broken. The economy's broken. But you have to look at the numbers rationally, try and interpret them all and try and understand what's going on. Yes, our exports to the United States have dropped significantly. That's what the United States wants. They put tariffs on our products, so it will cost their importers more to buy those products, so they're going to buy less of them. So we can expect that those exports to the United States will stay low or maybe continue to decrease. But Canada is not just going to sit around and do nothing about it. There's a whole world out there that needs what we have, and we're stepping up to the plate and exporting to the rest of the world. Partly because our Prime Minister has been working really hard to connect with other leaders. He's visited Europe. He's talked to all the European leaders. He had talks with all the G7 leaders recently. He has reignited relationships with India and China now. He's working really hard to build a relationship between the Canadian government and governments from all potential trading partners around the world. And now it's up to Canadian companies to step up to the plate and take advantage of that. Because whenever Canadians are faced with a challenge, we just roll up our sleeves, get to work, and get the job done. Yes, there's going to be some doom and gloom in the media. Just ignore it. Nobody built a country or a nation by spreading doom and gloom. It's hard work, it's slow work, it takes time, but Canada's on the right path. And that's why, once again, I have to say, I am just cautiously optimistic for our future. Yes, you might read a report that Canada's economy hasn't surged forward, growth isn't huge this year, but put it in perspective. Our exports to the United States, our biggest trading partner, have decreased 16% through actions that we did not instigate. And yet this month we posted an increase in overall exports of 1% because we're just replacing that trade with the rest of the world. That's huge. That's a complete success. What more could you expect at this stage in the game? Don't you remember all the doom and gloom and predictions of disaster that were circulating in the media immediately after those tariffs were first imposed? Do you remember what you felt like in those first few weeks? How we all feared for the very existence and future of our country? Well, the numbers are showing that we're doing just fine. A lot better than anyone would have even anticipated. So I'll leave you with that. I hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the content. And I have to point out here, behind me here, this is not a painting or a postcard or an artificial AI image. This is a real place that you can go and see in Canada. This is Moraine Lake in the Rocky Mountains of Alberta. The colors have not been adjusted and there's been no photoshopping. This is how beautiful our country is. Thanks for watching, everyone. Subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the content. Share the video to get the word out to more people. And if you want to support this channel and my work monetarily on a monthly basis, consider becoming a channel member. I leave a link for that in my comment in the comment section that I pinned to the top. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you all on the next one.